I'm Amber Wilson, 34, and until 6 months ago, I thought I knew what grief felt like. Then my dad died of a heart attack, leaving behind his vintage Rolex, the last gift from my mom before cancer took her, engraved with "Forever yours, Emma." Yesterday, my phone rang. Brian from Second Chance Pawn was calling about that watch, the one my stepmother Judith and stepbrother Kyle promised was safe. The one they sold without telling me. Before I continue the story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If this story resonates with you, please hit that like and subscribe button. Family betrayal happens more often than we think. And I'm about to share how I fought for the last piece of my parents I had left. My father, Thomas Wilson, was my hero. After Mom died when I was 15, it was just Dad and me against the world. We developed rituals to keep her memory alive: Sunday pancakes, her specialty, annual trips to Lake Michigan where he proposed to her, and most importantly, the careful maintenance of her Rolex watch. That watch was more than just an expensive timepiece. Mom had saved for years to buy it for Dad on their 10th anniversary, just months before her diagnosis. The engraving, "Forever yours, Emma," became even more poignant after she passed. "This watch keeps time with my heart," Dad would say, "and someday, when I'm gone, it will help you remember both of us." Our tight-knit world expanded when I was 24 and Dad met Judith at a community fundraiser. I was in graduate school then, building my own life, and I genuinely wanted him to find happiness. Judith seemed kind, if a bit reserved, and came with a son, Kyle, who was 22 at the time. I made honest attempts to welcome them into our small family. Family dinners every other Sunday, I suggested, and for the first year, we maintained that schedule. I helped Kyle with his resume when he graduated college. I invited Judith shopping for Dad's birthday presents. I really tried to build relationships with them. But the effort always felt one-sided. Kyle would cancel plans last minute or spend family dinners glued to his phone. He had a way of turning conversations toward himself, showcasing a sense of entitlement that grew more pronounced over time. Judith was better, but her loyalty always laid firmly with her son. "Kyle's just finding his way," she'd defend when Dad expressed frustration about his third abandoned job in 2 years. Not everyone follows a traditional path. My relationship with them deteriorated further after Dad mentioned his will to me during a private lunch 5 years after his remarriage. "I want you to know, Amber," he said, touching the Rolex on his wrist, "most of my assets will go to Judith, which is right since she's my wife. But this watch, this is yours. It always has been. Your mother wanted you to have it eventually." I told him not to worry about such things, that he had years ahead, but secretly his words comforted me. "You need to come to Memorial Hospital. Your father's had a heart attack." By the time I arrived, he was gone. Just like that, no goodbye, no final words. The grief hit me like a physical blow, leaving me gasping through the funeral arrangements, the service, the endless platitudes from well-meaning friends. Throughout it all, Judith maintained a composed demeanor that sometimes struck me as cold. Kyle oscillated between performative grief when others were watching and bored disengagement when he thought no one was looking. During the funeral reception at Dad's house, now Judith's house, I overheard him in the kitchen. "How long do we have to keep this up?" he muttered to his mother. "These people have been here for hours." "These people are paying respects to Thomas," she replied, but without real reproach in her voice. 2 weeks after the funeral, Judith's lips tightened when that part was read, and Kyle rolled his eyes. "It's just a watch," he said afterward in the parking lot. "I don't know why you're so obsessed with it." "It was my mother's gift to him," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's not about the money." "Sure," he smirked, clearly not believing me. Judith placed a hand on his arm. "We understand it has sentimental value, Amber. We'll take good care of it until you can pick it up." I should have collected it immediately, but work had piled up during my bereavement leave. As marketing director for a rapidly expanding tech company, I had major campaigns that couldn't wait. So I scheduled to visit the following weekend, only to have Judith text that she had a prior commitment. This pattern continued for almost a month, always a reason I couldn't come by, always a promise that the watch was safe. Finally, 6 weeks after the funeral, I insisted on stopping by after work. Judith seemed flustered when I arrived, claiming she needed to search for the watch, that she had put it somewhere safe and needed time to locate it. I thought you said it was in Dad's personal safe, I said, confused by her behavior. Oh, right, she stammered. Let me check there. I followed her to Dad's office, where she opened the small wall safe behind his degrees. She rummaged through documents, jewelry boxes, and various valuables, her movements becoming increasingly frantic. That's strange, she said, not meeting my eyes. It's not here. Perhaps Thomas moved it before he passed. A defensive edge entering her voice. Maybe you're mistaken about his habits. You didn't live here, after all. That comment stung, deliberately highlighting my outsider status in what had once been my home. I searched the office myself, then Dad's bedroom, finding nothing. Kyle arrived home during my search, exchanging meaningful glances with his mother that heightened my suspicion. I'm sure it'll turn up, he said with artificial casualness. Why not leave your number and we'll call when we find it? You both know how important that watch is to me, I said, fighting tears of frustration. It's the last connection I have to both my parents. We're your family too, Amber, Judith said. I was in the middle of a presentation when my phone vibrated persistently in my pocket. Normally, I would have ignored it. But something, intuition perhaps, made me excuse myself during a colleague's portion of the slide deck. Is this Amber Wilson? The male voice was unfamiliar. Yes, who's calling? I stepped into the hallway, nodding apologetically at my boss through the conference room glass. My name is Brian Davis. I own Second Chance Pawn on Michigan Avenue. I believe I have something that belongs to you, a Rolex watch with a very specific engraving. My heart seemed to stop, then restart at double speed. What did you say? A Rolex watch. Engraved with "Forever Yours, Emma." A young man sold it to us yesterday, but something about the transaction fell off. When I examined it more closely and saw the engraving, I decided to do some research. How did you find me? My voice sounded distant, even to my own ears. The engraving gave me a starting point. I did some online searching. Found an obituary for Thomas Wilson that mentioned his daughter Amber. A bit more digging led me to your LinkedIn profile. The seller claimed the watch belonged to his family. But if you're Thomas Wilson's daughter, I am. And that watch was specifically left to me in my father's will. My fingers gripped the phone so tightly they ached. Who sold it to you? Was it Kyle Sanders? There was a brief pause. I'm not comfortable confirming that over the phone for privacy reasons. But if you come to the shop with identification and documentation about the inheritance, we can discuss this further. I'll be there in 30 minutes. I returned to the conference room just long enough to whisper a family emergency to my boss, then grabbed my purse and raced to the parking garage. The 20-minute drive to Michigan Avenue felt interminable. My mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. Had the watch been stolen by someone outside the family? Had Judith truly misplaced it? But deep down, I already knew. Kyle had taken what wasn't his, what was never his to take. Second Chance Pawn was a surprisingly upscale establishment, with security cameras and elegant display cases that defied the stereotype of seedy pawn shops. Behind the counter stood a man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and reading glasses. Mr. Davis? My voice quavered. Brian, please. He studied my face. You must be Amber Wilson. You look like your father. I found his photo in that obituary. You have my father's watch? He nodded solemnly. It's here. I haven't processed it into our system yet because something felt wrong about the sale. The seller seemed nervous, and the watch is clearly valuable, both monetarily and sentimentally. Brian led me to a private office in the back, unlocked a safe, and placed a familiar leather box on the desk between us. When he opened it, emotion overwhelmed me. There it was, the stainless steel Rolex Datejust with the distinctive blue dial that Dad had worn every day since Mom died. I reached for it with trembling fingers. May I? Brian nodded. And I lifted the watch, turning it over to see the engraving that had adorned my dreams and memories for years. Forever yours, Emma. My mother's handwriting. Especially when he accepted my first offer without negotiation. For a watch worth at least $45,000, He took 15,000 without blinking. 15,000? I echoed, shocked both by the amount Kyle had received and by the watch's significant value. I knew it was expensive, but had no idea it was worth that much. Vintage Rolex Datejusts in this condition, with documentation and a meaningful provenance, command premium prices, Brian explained. Your stepbrother was either ignorant of its value or in a hurry to cash in. Probably both, I said, wiping away tears I hadn't realized were falling. What happens now? Legally, the watch is mine. I believe you, but I need documentation, the will, specifically, before I can release it. I'm also legally obligated to return the money that was paid out. $15,000 that Kyle has probably already spent, I said bitterly. Unfortunately, yes. But I'll hold the watch for you. It won't be sold to anyone else, I promise you that. I thanked him profusely, still holding the watch, unwilling to place it back in the box just yet. How he'd let me wear it as a child, the heavy band comically large on my small wrist. Take a moment, Brian said kindly, handing me a tissue. I'll be right outside when you're ready. Stealing not just a valuable object, but a priceless connection to my past. When I emerged from the office, composure somewhat restored, Brian handed me his business card with his personal cell number written on the back. Call me directly when you have the documentation. And Amber? For what it's worth, I'm sorry about your father. He raised a daughter who clearly loved him very much. I left the pawn shop with renewed purpose, the address of my stepmother's house, my childhood home, already entered into my GPS. Was the vehicle in the driveway, a gleaming new BMW M4 that certainly hadn't been there during my last visit. My stomach churned as I parked behind it. $15,000 could make a nice down payment on such a luxury car. I rang the doorbell, mentally rehearsing what I would say, trying to control the rage threatening to boil over. Judith answered, her expression shifting from surprise to wariness when she saw my face. Amber? We weren't expecting you. Clearly, I replied. The one legally bequeathed to me in Dad's will. She crossed her arms defensively. You shouldn't have gone behind our backs like that. Behind your backs? My voice rose despite my efforts to remain calm. You lied to me. You both knew exactly where that watch was, in Kyle's pocket on the way to be pawned for a fraction of its worth. What's all the shouting about? Kyle appeared from the kitchen, a sandwich in one hand. He froze when he saw me, a flash of guilt quickly replaced by defiance. The pawnshop owner called me, I said, turning to face him. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? Kyle's eyes darted to his mother, seeking support. It's just a watch, Amber. Why are you making such a big deal about this? It's my watch, legally left to me by my father. You had no right to sell it. Your father would have wanted to help Kyle succeed, Judith interjected, moving to stand beside her son. This business opportunity could change his life, and Thomas always said family should support each other's dreams. Support, yes. Steal from each other, no. And what business is this exactly, Kyle? Because it looks like the first thing you invested in was a new BMW. Kyle's face flushed. The car is part of my business image. No one takes you seriously if you show up in a beater. What business? I pressed. I'm launching a social media consultancy, he mumbled. The car is a legitimate business expense. Right. And I suppose the Rolex would have been another legitimate business expense if you hadn't needed quick cash. You're being selfish, Judith cut in. It's just a thing, a material possession. Your father is gone, and holding on to his watch won't bring him back. Don't you dare tell me how to grieve him, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. That watch connects me to both my parents. It was the last gift my mother gave him before she died, and Dad treasured it for that reason. He specifically left it to me because he knew what it meant. Oh please, Kyle scoffed. You're obsessed with the past. It's unhealthy, this fixation on objects. Says the man who just spent $15,000 on a car to impress potential clients for a business that doesn't exist yet. Kyle's face darkened. The business is real. I want the watch back, I stated firmly. Either return it or repay the $15,000 to redeem it from the pawn shop. Judith laughed incredulously. 15,000? We don't have that kind of money just lying around. You seem to have had it for the BMW, I pointed out. And by the way, that watch is worth at least $45,000. Kyle sold a family heirloom for a third of its value to fund his latest whim. Kyle's eyes widened at this revelation, his expression briefly showing calculation, probably regretting not shopping the watch around for a better price. "We're not giving you the money," Judith said firmly. "And if you make trouble about this, we'll contest the will." Thomas wasn't thinking clearly in his final months. We could argue he was being unduly influenced. The threat hit me like a slap. Not only had they stolen from me, but now they were threatening to drag my father's memory through a legal battle. "You would dishonor Dad's wishes like that? After everything he did for both of you?" "We're just being practical," Kyle said with a shrug. "The watch is gone. Move on." I stared at them, these people who had been in my life for a decade, suddenly seeing them with perfect clarity. My father had been their meal ticket, their security, and now that he was gone, the pretense of family had evaporated. "You know what's sad?" I said, backing toward the door. "Dad wanted so badly for us to be a real family. He would be heartbroken to see what you've done." "Don't be dramatic," Judith began, but I cut her off. "But I wouldn't let them take my father's legacy too." The drive home passed in a blur. I parked in my apartment garage, but couldn't bring myself to go upstairs. Instead, I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, trying to process the confrontation. My phone buzzed repeatedly, Judith, then Kyle, no doubt trying to manage the situation now that I'd discovered their deception. I ignored the calls. Finally, when the garage's fluorescent lights began to hurt my eyes, I made my way to my apartment. The space that had always been my sanctuary now felt empty. I called the one person who had stood by me through everything. "Samantha? I need you." My best friend since college arrived 30 minutes later with wine, chocolate, and a fierce protective energy that made me feel less alone. I poured out the whole story, the missing watch, the pawn shop call, the confrontation with Judith and Kyle, the new BMW. "Those absolute vultures," Samantha said, refilling my wine glass. "The watch wasn't even in the ground before they started picking at his legacy." "Dad trusted them," I whispered. "This isn't just about sentimentality anymore. They stole from you, legally stole your property." "I know." I twisted the tissue in my hands. "But fighting them means prolonging this pain. Keeping the wound open. Maybe I should just let it go, try to move on." Samantha took my hands, forcing me to look at her. "Remember your mom's funeral?" The question caught me off guard. Dad had been so strong throughout her illness, but in that moment, he seemed ready to collapse. He had removed the Rolex from his wrist and pressed it into my palm. "Hold this for me," he had whispered, his voice breaking. "Your mother's love is in this watch. As long as it keeps ticking, she's still with us." I had clutched it throughout the service, the weight of it anchoring me when I felt I might float away on a sea of grief. Afterward, when I tried to return it, Dad had shaken his head. "Keep it tonight," he said. "And someday, when I'm gone too, it will be yours for good. A piece of both of us, always with you." I slept with the watch under my pillow that night, the gentle ticking a reminder that life continued. That love remained, even after devastating loss. "I can't let it go," I admitted, coming back to the present. "That watch is the physical embodiment of both my parents' love." Kyle sold it like it was nothing more than metal and mechanics. "Then you fight," Samantha said simply. "And you start by calling Michael." Michael Chin, another college friend. He answered on the third ring. "Amber? Everything okay?" I explained the situation as concisely as possible. "They don't have a legal leg to stand on," he assured me. "The will explicitly left the watch to you. Their possession and subsequent sale of it constitutes theft of inherited property." Judith's threat to contest the will is just that, a threat. "From what you've told me about your father's mental state and the clear language of the will, any contest would fail. So what do I do now?" "Document everything. Get a copy of the pawn transaction if possible. Gather all evidence that the watch belonged to your father and was left to you." I pulled out my laptop and began researching vintage Rolex watches similar to my father's. Brian had been right, comparable models were valued between $40,000 and $50,000, with some exceptional pieces commanding even higher prices. The thought of Kyle carelessly selling such a valuable item for quick cash made me physically ill. But more than its monetary value, I found myself searching for photos that matched my father's watch, trying to recapture the comfort of seeing it on his wrist. Each image brought back memories: Dad checking the time at my high school graduation, the way he would wind it every morning in a ritual that connected him to my mother, how he would let me wear it on special occasions after I grew up, saying it looked better on me than him. Around midnight, I received a text from Kyle. "You're making this into a bigger deal than it needs to be. You're going to regret causing trouble for the family." The thinly veiled threat only strengthened my resolve. This wasn't just about a watch anymore. It was about honoring my father, preserving my mother's memory, and refusing to let Kyle and Judith rewrite our family history to suit their narrative. I spent the night alternating between tears and determination, finally falling asleep as dawn broke. When I woke, my path forward was clear. I would fight for the watch with everything I had. Not just because it was legally mine, but because some things in life are worth fighting for, no matter the cost. I called in sick to work, then contacted Denise Harper, the attorney Michael had recommended. By noon, I had an appointment scheduled for the following day. Next, I called Brian at the pawn shop. "I'm getting documentation from the will and consulting with an attorney," I told him. "Please keep holding the watch." "Of course," he assured me. "And Amber?" The ones who fight for sentimental reasons rather than monetary value are usually the ones who deserve to win. His words bolstered my courage. I spent the rest of the day gathering evidence: photos of Dad wearing the watch, birthday cards where he mentioned its significance, the section of the will specifically bequeathing it to me. I even found an email from 3 years ago where Dad had the watch appraised for insurance purposes, documenting its value at that time as $38,000. As I compiled this evidence of my father's life and legacy, I felt his presence around me, encouraging me forward. The watch had kept time with his heart for decades. Now, fighting for it was keeping his memory alive in mine. The law offices of Harper and Associates occupied the 15th floor of a downtown high-rise with views of Lake Michigan. Denise Harper, a formidable woman in her 50s with a reputation for tenacity in estate disputes, listened intently as I shared my story and presented my documentation. "This is quite straightforward from a legal perspective," she said when I finished. "The will is explicit, the item is clearly identifiable, and you have substantial evidence of your father's intention for you to inherit the watch. Your stepbrother had no legal right to sell it. So, what do we do first?" We send a formal legal notice to both Judith and Kyle, demanding either the return of the watch or compensation for its full market value, which, based on your documentation and current market conditions, will set at $47,000. I winced at the amount. "They'll never pay that." "They don't have to pay the full amount," Denise explained. "They only need to return the $15,000 to the pawn shop to redeem the watch." The higher valuation serves two purposes. It establishes the seriousness of their transgression and provides leverage for negotiation. She typed notes as we spoke, her fingers moving with practiced efficiency. "We'll also file a police report for theft of inherited property." While the police may view this as primarily a civil matter, having an official report strengthens our position. The prospect of involving law enforcement made my stomach tighten. Will they be arrested? That's unlikely for a first offense involving family members, but it creates a formal record of the theft. More importantly, it signals to Judith and Kyle that you're serious about pursuing this matter to its fullest extent. I signed the necessary documents authorizing Denise to represent me, feeling both relieved to have professional guidance and apprehensive about the escalation. As I prepared to leave, Denise offered a final piece of advice: gather any witnesses who can testify to your father's intentions regarding the watch. Personal testimony can be powerful in these cases. On the elevator ride down, I mentally cataloged people who might help. One name immediately came to mind: Harold Peterson, my father's best friend of 30 years. I called him from the parking garage. "Amber, I was just thinking about you. How are you holding up, kiddo?" Harold's familiar voice, with its slight southern drawl, instantly transported me to countless backyard barbecues and holiday gatherings. I explained the situation, my voice breaking despite my efforts to remain composed. Those conniving, Harold cut himself off. Sorry, but this makes my blood boil. Tom specifically told me that watch was going to you. We talked about it the week before he passed. It should have gone to her years ago, but I couldn't bear to take it off. He was very explicit, Amber. Would you be willing to provide a statement to that effect? My attorney says witness testimony could help. I'll do one better, Harold replied. I'll testify in court if needed. Your dad was like a brother to me, and I won't stand by while those two dishonor his wishes. With Harold's support secured, I drove to Second Chance Pond to speak with Brian again. This time I brought copies of the will and insurance documentation. This is exactly what I needed, Brian said, reviewing the papers. I can now officially confirm the watch was stolen property when it was sold to us. Can you provide records of the transaction? My attorney says it would strengthen our case. Brian nodded. I'll print them for you now. And there's something else that might help. We have surveillance footage of all transactions. The video clearly shows Kyle selling the watch and accepting payment. This was better than I'd hoped. Can I get a copy of that too? I'll need a formal request from your attorney or a subpoena, but yes, we'll preserve the footage. As Brian gathered the transaction records, my phone buzzed with a text from Kyle. Just got a letter from some lawyer. What the hell, Amber? You're really going to see your own family? I didn't respond, but my phone rang almost immediately. Kyle's name flashed on the screen. After a moment's hesitation, I answered. What do you want, Kyle? You need to call off your attack dog lawyer, he demanded, his voice tight with anger. This is completely unnecessary. We can work this out between us. We tried that approach. You lied to my face and sold something that didn't belong to you. It's just a stupid watch. Why are you willing to destroy this family over it? You destroyed this family when you stole my inheritance, I replied, surprising myself with my steadiness. And it's not just a watch, it's the last connection I have to both my parents. Oh, spare me this sentimental bullshit. Everything's always about your precious feelings. No, Kyle. This is about the law. The watch legally belongs to me, and you committed theft by selling it. He switched tactics, his voice suddenly pleading. Look, I made a mistake, okay? I needed the money for the business, and I thought it would be no big deal. I didn't realize it meant so much to you. You knew exactly what it meant to me. That's why you and Judith lied about not being able to find it. What do you want from me, Amber? I don't have the money anymore. Sell the BMW. Are you kidding me? I just bought that car. With money from selling my property. Your choices are simple. Return the money, return the watch. Or face legal consequences. Kyle's voice turned cold again. You'll regret this, Amber. Dad would be so disappointed in how petty and vindictive you've become. The mention of my father in this context ignited a fury I'd been suppressing. Don't you dare speak for my father. He valued honesty and integrity above all else, two qualities you clearly lack. If anyone would be disappointed, it's in you for stealing from his daughter. I ended the call as Brian returned with the transaction records. My hands were shaking. But not from fear, from the rush of finally standing up for myself and my father's memory. Everything okay? Brian asked, noticing my expression. Getting there, I replied. For the first time since Dad died, I think I'm doing exactly what he would want me to do. When I returned home, there was a voicemail from Judith. Her tone oscillating between conciliatory and threatening. Amber, dear, we need to talk about this misunderstanding without lawyers. Kyle made a mistake. But pursuing this legally will only hurt everyone. Think about what your father would want, harmony in the family. If you insist on this course of action, we'll have no choice but to contest the entire will. Please be reasonable. I forwarded the message to Denise with a brief note. More threats. Proceeding as planned. The next morning. Such matters were often resolved in civil court. The important thing, he assured me, is that we have an official record of the theft. That often motivates people to resolve these situations without further legal intervention. By late afternoon, the formal legal notice had been delivered to both Judith and Kyle. I braced myself for more angry calls, but instead received a single text from Kyle. You want to ruin this family? Fine. Game on. The threat might have intimidated me a month ago, but now it only strengthened my determination. I had spent too long trying to accommodate Judith and Kyle, too long accepting their dismissal of my feelings and needs. That ended now. I called Samantha to update her on the day's developments. I should feel terrible about all this, I admitted. Dragging family issues into the legal system, involving the police. But honestly, I feel empowered. Because you're finally standing up for yourself, she replied. Your dad would be proud, Amber. He raised you to fight for what's right. That night, I slept better than I had since my father died, comforted by the knowledge that I was honoring his memory in the most meaningful way possible, by refusing to let others diminish the love he and my mother had shared, the legacy they had created together, the heritage that was rightfully mine. 3 weeks after initiating legal proceedings, I received an unexpected call from Denise Harper. Judith Sanders has requested a meeting, she informed me. She's asked that it be held at a neutral location, without attorneys present. Is that wise? I asked, skeptical of Judith's motives. Normally I'd advise against it, but the fact that she's initiating contact suggests she may be ready to negotiate. You don't have to agree to anything, and I'll brief you thoroughly beforehand. We arranged to meet Judith at a coffee shop downtown, public enough to discourage dramatic scenes, but quiet enough for a private conversation. I arrived early, selecting a corner table that offered some privacy without isolation. When Judith entered, I was struck by how tired she looked. The perfectly coiffed woman who had always maintained a polished appearance now seemed diminished, with dark circles under her eyes and a slight stoop to her shoulders. Thank you for agreeing to meet, she said, sliding into the seat across from me. What do you want, Judith? I kept my tone neutral, neither hostile nor welcoming. She sighed, folding her hands on the table. This situation has gotten out of hand. The legal notices, the police report, it's become a nightmare. A nightmare you and Kyle created. I know. Online sports betting mostly. He started small, but it escalated over the past year. By the time Thomas died, Kyle owed nearly $20,000 to some very unpleasant people. So you let him steal my inheritance to pay off bookies? I couldn't keep the incredulity from my voice. I was scared for him, she whispered. These aren't people who take IOUs. When he suggested selling the watch, I objected at first, but he was desperate. I convinced myself Thomas would have wanted to protect his stepson. By stealing from his daughter? I shook my head in disbelief. Dad would never have condoned that, and you know it. You're right. Tears welled in her eyes. I made a terrible mistake, and I'm sorry. Before I could respond, the coffee shop door banged open, and Kyle stormed in, his face flushed with anger. What the hell, Mom? I've been calling you for hours. He stopped short when he saw me. Of course. Gesturing toward me but remaining standing. She's the one who escalated this with lawyers and cops. Because you stole my watch, I replied evenly. It wasn't stealing. Then narrowed as he turned to Judith. You told her? How could you? She deserves the truth, Judith replied, a new firmness in her voice. What we did was wrong. Several nearby customers were now watching our exchange with undisguised interest. A barista approached our table. Is everything okay here? Fine, Kyle snapped. Actually, no, I contradicted. This man sold a watch that was left to me in my father's will to pay off gambling debts. Now he's harassing us because I'm trying to get it back. The barista's eyebrows shot up, and the customers who had been pretending not to listen now openly stared at Kyle. Public shame accomplished what weeks of legal pressure hadn't. Kyle's demeanor instantly shifted. This is a private family matter, he muttered, sliding into a chair. No, it's theft, an elderly man at the next table interjected. Young man, you should be ashamed of yourself. Kyle's face flushed dark red. For the first time since this ordeal began, I saw a flicker of genuine remorse in his expression. I didn't think it would be such a big deal, he said quietly. It's just a watch. It was never just a watch, I replied. It was my connection to both my parents, a piece of their love story that I was meant to inherit. You knew that, and you sold it anyway. I thought if I looked successful, I could attract investors for the business, turn things around. There is no business, Kyle. There never was. It was just another scheme to avoid actual work. Judith placed a hand on his arm. Amber's right. This has to stop, Kyle. The lies, the shortcuts, the gambling. Your stepfather loved you, but he wouldn't recognize the man you've become. Kyle's facade finally crumbled completely. I messed up. I know that. But how am I supposed to fix this now? The money's gone. You get the watch back, Judith said firmly. We find the money somewhere. How? I'm broke, Mom. Worse than broke. We'll sell the car, she decided. It should cover the $15,000 plus interest. Sell the Kyle began to protest. Then stopped as both Judith and I fixed him with identical stares. Fine. Sell the car. And you get help for the gambling, Judith added. Real help, not just promises to stop. He nodded. Defeated. I'll do whatever it takes. We spent the next hour hammering out the details. Kyle would sell the BMW immediately, using the proceeds to redeem the watch from the pawn shop. He would also enroll in a gambling addiction program, with Judith paying for therapy from her own funds. I want you to know, Judith said as we prepared to leave, that I truly am sorry, Amber. I let my desire to protect Kyle override my integrity. Thomas deserved better from me, and so did you. Thank you for that, I replied, surprised by how much her apology meant. I don't think we'll ever be close, Judith, but I'd like to at least be at peace with each other. Dad would have wanted that. He would have, she agreed, tears spilling down her cheeks. He always saw the best in all of us. 3 days later, I received a text from Kyle with a photo of a cashier's check made out to Second Chance Pawn for $15,000. BMW sold. Getting the watch tomorrow. I know it doesn't fix everything, but I'm sorry, Amber. Really sorry. The next day, I met Judith and Kyle at the pawn shop. Brian greeted us with professional courtesy, showing no judgment about the circumstances that had brought us there. The transaction was completed quickly. Kyle handed over the cashier's check, and Brian retrieved the watch from the safe. Would you like to do the honors? Brian asked me, holding out the leather box. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. When I opened the box and saw the Rolex nestled inside, exactly as it had been on my father's wrist for decades, tears blurred my vision. I lifted it carefully, feeling its familiar weight, running my thumb over the smooth crystal face. Thank you. I managed finally, looking at Brian, for recognizing this was more than just a business transaction. Some things matter more than money, he replied simply. I'm glad it's back where it belongs. As we left the shop, Judith touched my arm lightly. Your father would be at peace now, knowing his wish was honored. I nodded, still too emotional for words. Kyle hung back. We parted ways in the parking lot, our relationship forever changed, but perhaps, in some ways, more honest than it had ever been. I didn't know if we would ever be a true family. But at least now we had a foundation of truth to build upon if we chose to try. The first thing I did after returning home with the watch was to place it carefully on my dresser, where the afternoon sunlight caught the stainless steel and made it gleam. For several minutes, I simply stood there, watching it, feeling my father's presence more strongly than I had since his death. I got it back, Dad, I whispered. Just like you wanted. Over the next few weeks. When Brian called to check if everything was okay with the watch, I thanked him again for his role in its return. I'd like to pay you something for your trouble, I offered. A finder's fee or commission. Not necessary, he replied. Seeing that watch go back to its rightful owner was payment enough. In this business, I harbored no illusions about becoming close with Kyle, but I didn't wish him ill either. The most healing moment came 3 months after recovering the watch. On a clear autumn day, I drove to the cemetery where both my parents were buried. I wore the Rolex, carefully adjusted to fit my wrist, feeling its gentle weight as a physical connection to them both. At my father's grave, about the resolution that had been reached. I think you'd be proud, Dad, I said, touching the watch face gently. Not just that I got it back, but how I handled everything. I didn't give up. But I didn't let bitterness consume me either. The cool autumn breeze rustled the nearby trees, and I imagined it was his way of agreeing. I stayed there for over an hour, remembering him. The display case sat on a small table alongside framed photos of my parents, my father wearing the watch at their wedding, my mother laughing as she presented it to him on their anniversary. The three of us together during happier times. When I wasn't wearing it for special occasions, the watch rested there, a silent sentinel preserving their memory. The experience changed me in ways I hadn't anticipated. I became more assertive in other areas of my life, less willing to accommodate others at the expense of my own needs and feelings. At work, I successfully negotiated a promotion I'd been hesitant to pursue. In personal relationships, I established clearer boundaries, recognizing that true connections require mutual respect. I also developed a deeper understanding of grief, how it can be complicated by family dynamics, how objects can carry powerful emotional connections, how protecting those connections sometimes means fighting for them. The watch wasn't just a timepiece, it was a physical representation of my parents' love and my father's wishes. Defending it meant defending their memory and my place in our family story. Perhaps most importantly, I learned that family isn't always defined by blood or legal ties. I wore the watch to a small gathering of his closest friends. Harold embraced me when he saw it on my wrist. "Tom would be so happy to see that where it belongs," he said, his eyes misting. "You know," he told me once, "that watch kept time with his heart. Now it keeps time with his memory." As I looked around at these people who had truly known and loved my father, but the endurance of love and the power of honoring those we've lost. That night, as I carefully placed the watch back in its display case, I realized that the most precious inheritance my father had left me wasn't the Rolex itself, but the values it represented: integrity, perseverance, and the courage to fight for what matters most. In protecting his final gift to me, I had discovered my own strength and reclaimed my place in our family's legacy. The watch continues to keep perfect time, just as my father promised it would. And in its steady ticking, I hear the enduring message from both my parents: that love transcends loss, that memories sustain us, and that some connections can never be broken, not by death, not by betrayal, not by time itself. If you've ever had to fight for something that held deep sentimental value, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Did you stand your ground or let it go? Looking back, do you feel you made the right choice? Please like and subscribe if this story resonated with you. And share it with someone who might need encouragement to stand up for what matters to them. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that some things in life are worth fighting for, no matter the cost.